Greetings and welcome to From the Basement. We're now ready to actually begin making the Galactic Mailer project. So let's go ahead and get started with loading in some sprite assets. Now we're going to have to do some additional work on the sprite assets since we made our own. We wouldn't have to go through these steps if we were using the book's resources. Let's go ahead and start by loading in the player's ship. So create a sprite. I'm going to start with the landed sprite, so I'm going to say SPR landed. I'm going to load sprite. And now I did change my project folder name to mailer assets from last time just so that it didn't get confused with my mailer project folder. And let's see here. There's ship landed. Now I don't have to remove the background because I already have a transparent background on this image. So I hit OK and you can see sure enough I got transparency there. Now, we don't want the ship to always be pointing to the right. The general gameplay design behind this game, which I guess we should have mentioned earlier, is that you're on a moon drifting through space and you need to launch off of that moon, navigate through the asteroids, and try to land on another moon. In other words, it's a top-down view, kind of like an asteroid-style game. So we need the ship to be able to point in multiple different orientations. It would look really weird having this image sliding all over the place with the nose always pointing forward. It would just be really weird. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not artistically talented enough to take this ship and draw it in 72 different orientations. Not to mention, that would take a lot of time, even if I could do it. So we're going to use some of GameMaker's sprite editor abilities to do this for us automatically. I'm going to go into Edit Sprite, and under Animation, I have a rotation sequence. Now, clockwise or counterclockwise, which one do we need? Well, again, remember, we're going to be orienting this ship's direction based on the degrees in a circle. Degrees in a circle increase in a counterclockwise direction. In other words, this direction is 0, so like 0 would be here, you counterclockwise up to 90, counterclockwise over to 180, so on and so forth. So I want a rotation sequence counterclockwise, and I want to do this in 5-degree increments, which comes out to be 72 frames of animation across a full 360 degrees. I hit OK. And it automatically rotates it. Now I can do a show preview here to make sure that everything looks okay. Now there's a little bit of jerkiness because I don't have the ship perfectly centered on the origin of this canvas. So there's a little bit of a hitch there. Close enough for prototype placeholder quality work. This is also why I told you to not get it too close to the edges. If it was too close to the edges, like the wings and nose and stuff would clip as it turned on these diagonals. So that gets the ship landed in there. And then we need to go ahead and do that for the flying as well. And it looks like I got my my jets. You can see the jets get clipped a little bit as they turn, but again, close enough for prototype level work. The fact that I've got a minor amount of clipping down there isn't a deal breaker for placeholder art. It still conveys the correct message and is still readable. Oops, and I do need to name you SPR flying. Okay, let's add in the moons next because they are a little bit different. In this case, I do not want to use load sprite. I'll show you what will happen if I do this. Don't follow on this one. If I load in the moons directly like this, I get all the moons as a single sprite. That's not what I want. I want to be able to choose between these as different frames. So I'm going to go in here to Edit Sprite, and what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to say Create from Strip. Remember when we were doing that video, I called it an animation strip. This is a very common technique where you take frames of animation and just put them together in a single image and then allow the application to break it apart into the individual frames. So we're going to do a create from strip. We're going to select the moons. Now we have to give it some information. How many images do we have? I have 4 images. How many images per row do I have? I have 4. And you can see it's slowly updating and building this preview here. What is my image width and height? Well, these are 64 by 64 images. And now you can see that my previews line up perfectly. The rest of these options, offset is, by the way, a cell offset, and so that's kind of really hard to see. Let's see here. Actually, I'm going to do a 2-cell offset. There we go. You can see now how these guys don't have frames around them, but these two do have frames around them. That's what I'm doing. I'm offsetting my cell start by 2 cells. Pixel offset, as well, like it says, pixel offset. So if I set this to 16, this one's a little bit easier to see. You can see that I offset the start by 16 pixels. Horizontal and vertical separators. Sometimes when you find sprite sheets or animation strips on the net, they'll have space in between the frames. This is what this would control. So if I put in 16, you can now see that there's a 16 pixel space in between my frames. But for what we have here, we need 4 images per row, because that's what I have. This is 64 by 64, and the rest of my values are 0. Hit OK. Now, showing the preview, this is spazzing out a little bit, but we don't actually intend on animating this, so that's okay. The important part is that I have it now broken up into these 4 sub-images. I'm also going to turn on precision collision checking for this. Modify mask, and yeah, that looks good. And that reminds me that I forgot to turn on precision collision detection for my ship landed. So let's talk about what we're doing here. So I'm going to go to modify mask here. By default, GameMaker is going to try to fit a square mask to your image. Now this does create some problems in that you can see here I've got this collision mask is covering like some huge empty chunks of space. So if I leave this as a square, and later on when we load in the asteroid and we leave that as a square, it's going to be very easy for the player to clip the empty sections of the ship and the asteroid, causing a collision message when clearly the ship and the asteroid weren't touching, and die. That will frustrate your player. So, and you probably noticed this too while you were testing the Dragon project, in that sometimes you would toast demons when you didn't really think you should have toasted them. More importantly and more annoyingly, you died or got hits registered when you really thought that there shouldn't have been a hit. Again, because it was using those squares, those boxes. So we're going to turn on precise collision detection. Notice now my shaded area fits the ship. There's one other thing that you need to make sure that is on, and that is separate collision masks. That is important. If you look at the tooltip on this, let me get that back in. Have separate collision masks for the sub-images. I would not want to use this mask for when the ship is pointing straight up and down. It wouldn't work. So make sure that you have separate collision masks turned on. And strictly speaking, actually, we didn't need to do that for landed, but it's a good thing to do. So I'm going to turn on precision, modify for flying, make sure that looks good. It does. Okay. All right, so we got our mask set up. We've got one last resource to load in before we can get to some functionality. Create sprite, load, asteroid, SPR, asteroid, precision collision checks. And we also want to do some rotating on this one. So I'm going to go into Edit Sprite, Animation, Rotation Sequence. And I'm going to make my asteroids rotate clockwise. because for them it doesn't matter. We're just, excuse me, we're just going to animate them, let them rotate on their own. So number of frames, 72, degrees, 360. Okay, show preview. Nice, gently rolling asteroid. Now you could slow this down a couple of ways. One way would be to go into the rotation sequence and instead of having 72 frames, say have 200 frames. And that does slow it down a little bit. The other way of slowing it down, and honestly this is probably the better way of slowing it down, is decreasing the speed. How fast should it go? So you can see here now my asteroid is going very slow. And I'm not going to fool with that right now. So animation, rotation sequence, clockwise. I'm going to bring that back down to 72. And there we go. Alright, so we've got all of those images loaded in. And since we're loading in images, let's go ahead and get our background loaded in. So I'm going to go into Backgrounds, Create, Load. Of course, you're going to make me go find you again. Mailer Assets, Star Background. Open up. And call this BG Stars. Alright, so we have all of our images loaded in, and so we're ready to start in on functionality. I'm going to go ahead and break the video here, and on the next video we'll take a look at getting our moons and asteroids flying through space correctly.